Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of ILLflips. I'm Jordan Barry Brown from ILLstrips. Today we're going to be taking a look at a magazine that's near and dear to my heart. It's going to be the first 6 issues of Métal Hurlant, the French sci-fi magazine that was released in 1974, December 1974, which is 49 years ago, and ran until 1987. It was founded by two cartoonists, Jean Giraud, aka Mobius, Philippe Droulet, Jean-Pierre Dionnet, who was a journalist and writer, and Bernard Farkas, who was the financial director. Collectively, the four were known as Les Humanoids Associés. This magazine was then published in America as Heavy Metal by National Lampoon and Schwer Metal in Germany. It was first a quarterly magazine, 68 pages for the first 6, which is what you see before you, and then it became bi-monthly after issue 7, and then monthly after number 9. So without further ado, I think we'll just have a look through number 1 to start. Just going to stick these others aside. And number 1 has that iconic Mobius illustration on the front of this kind of alien ape creature, which I don't think appears again in any of his comics, but it's a pretty striking image and it's been riffed on many times. So you can see that the title lettering is different for the first 5, and then they settled on the lettering for number 2 for 6 onwards. But I suppose this is probably the most similar, number 1 and number 2, the lettering choices. You always have the lightning bolts, and this is just a sharper version of this, I suppose. Okay, so let's dig in. So it starts with Mobius and Droulet doing a story together, approaching Centauri. And this is Mobius's illustration, cartooning, and Droulet doing the script. I'm pretty sure Droulet does a lot of scripts throughout the run of Métal Hurlant, and of course he's a very well-known cartoonist also for his works like Gale, Lone Sloan, and La Nuit. Interesting to see these two guys working together though, in black and white. I think these are 68 pages initially, and I think the whole run is probably 68 pages a piece, and there's I think only about 16 pages throughout which are in color, so the rest will be in black and white. Pretty amazing from the get-go. Mobius, always on point, already got a fair bit of pencil mileage under his belt before starting this magazine in the 70s, with a pretty big career in comics, bond designé already, with his Cowboy series Blueberry, amongst others. And then this is Droulet doing his first installment to the magazine. These guys are obviously both brilliant in black and white and color, and must have had just similar interests rattling around their head at the same time, and then teamed up with the writer Dionnet, Jean-Pierre Dionnet, with a bit of financial backing maybe from Bernard Farkas, financial director. And the magazine, apart from comics, it covers articles about science fiction film, paperback novels, and video games also eventually. But for the time being, it's really just a sci-fi magazine, which at the time was just very forefront in the zeitgeist in Europe and the States, and then Japan. Here's Mobius doing kind of more humor-driven cartooning. A story called Split, where this fella's, I guess, making his own little cabaret wife. So here's the first installation of Arzak, which became probably Mobius's most famous story. for good reason. You saw him in black and white at the start, and now you can see him in color. Probably using some kind of dyes, Doc Martin dyes or something like that for this. Maybe some watercolor also. Really stunning. I picked up most of these in Paris in a Pum Pum. I think I got maybe issues 5 and 6 in a Pum Pum, and most of the others from a little bande dessinée store on Rue Dante. The name is slipping me now. It carries a lot of the older stuff if you're ever on that street, but I picked up maybe the first 4 issues there. And actually, this blank space, the guy I bought issue 1 off, who was the owner of the store, he showed me another copy which was, I think, €400. I paid 50 for mine. I think that's kind of the going rate for number 1. But the one for €400 had a Mobius sketch side by side. I think it was a Mobius drawing of a Droulet character before this begins, which was pretty cool, but didn't quite have funds to spend 400 quid on it. I think it was already spoken for. It was interesting to see. So I think this is the beginning of Alone Sloan Droulet, and just these bonkers ideas on every page in his world of sharp and symmetrical and disturbed kind of heavy metal inspired sci-fi. Very dramatic, very operatic. And you can see this double page spread. This is kind of a little glimpse into what will become a style of his, having a very symmetrical page built up of just different angular shapes and all sorts of creatures and characters, architecture. These guys have very singular voices, and I think they probably inspire just a huge amount of other artists who would soon be a part of this magazine. Also, the cast of the magazine does become much wider, not too long into the run, with artists like Kaza, and obviously then the Americans come over too. I think all the Humanoid Associates were very interested in Richard Corbin here, and the work he was doing in the American Underground comics. So this is from 1971, so I think this was first printed in Up From the Deep, which we actually had a look at in the Corbin Underground episode I did. This is just a funny little tale of 2 aliens in love, little romance yarn, who are evading predatory creatures on this planet, and soon realizing there are much larger creatures also walking amongst them and crushing them. Very sad in the end for C-Dupe. It's his little girlfriend crushed. This is more Mobius, more kind of humor stuff, already displaying such a range in style. The man could work in a crazy amount of styles. We could always see the Jean Giraud or Mobius shining through. And this is by Jean-Claude Gall, written by Dionne. This is just like, again, I remember first looking at this and just being blown away by the level of craft in this drawing. It's almost, I hate to say it, but it's the actual drawing is probably the best out of all the guys in here for, I suppose, technicality. It's less cartoony, but his black and white is stunning, and the amount of detail he's able to get in stuff like foliage, vegetation, architecture, the human face, and then there's a lot of great creatures he does too. This, I think in English this is called Armies. I've never read it in English. I know there is a collection of it. I think it might be colored though, which is a bit disappointing. I can't remember. There's a reason why I didn't pick it up. But I think it's set in Roman times, as far as I remember. But really amazing work, and it's got a bit of that flavor of thru, the symmetry and shapes. And I'm surprised he's not talked about more, this Jean-Claude Gall. Maybe there's a reason why, but I need to look into him more, because he's just as good as anybody else. Maybe he doesn't have the imagination that thru and Mobius did. Kick it off. So that's a flip through of number 1. Philippe Droulet on the cover of number 2. Also a pretty iconic cover. Some editorial from the start. Philippe Droulet. And it's a similar gecko to scale. There's a lot of iconic imagery here, especially this image. And this is where you can really see all these circular template shapes Droulet is using to create these just crazy detail, bonkers images. This sort of helmet or suit he's in, and then juxtaposed with this very detailed lined face. Really beautiful work. And then you can see these, you could almost cut yourself on these spaceships he's drawing. This looks like Mobius handwriting throughout. Taking no shorts. The typewriter. And then we have this Jules Leclerc character arrive. This again. Written by DNA and Mandrika on the art duties. Second installment of Arzak. Still out on these crazy worm-like fields with his flying beast coming up on this giant ape. And always, this stuff is just, I don't know, so ahead of its time for movement and just the feel of these drops and jumps and the weight and all the characters. Don't think you're seeing this level of understanding of just how to compose pages in science fiction comics before these guys. And then I suppose it's one of the first adult themed comics magazines of the time, which made it very popular also. I think it was pretty popular from the jump in Europe, and then it slowly slid its way over to the States and eventually got its own publishing debut with Heavy Metal, and a lot of these stories will then reoccur in there. Yeah, this is just really beautiful stuff. Just even the attention to detail of the time passing with the sun setting in the background. This guy in the middle of another circular panel. Here's your Jules Leclerc again. Twice, is it? Yeah. down here is armies. Again, pretty amazing stuff. Look at these cliffs. I'm sure this level of detail is almost getting lost in the camera, but really good at drawing creatures, jungles, you name it. Rosetta style tigers. Using lighting on this black and white figure. Here. I always like this spider web. Very disturbing. Well, it's also disturbing that he managed to draw all these cobwebs. Like a nightmare. Looks great, and look at this. He's very good at lizards also. We'll see more lizards in a moment. But he's got a feel also, again, of just, that's a Mobius style panel. Corbin also. I guess they're all just feeding off each other at the time. Here's these lizards. Gang of lizards jumping on this dude. Beastman. Lizard minions. But the level of detail, even on these Komodo dragon scales, if you get in close, pretty wild. Should almost do this for every page. Yeah, it would be nice to read this in English sometime. Got a second appearance by Richard Corbin, which I think this was from maybe Fever Dreams or one of his other underground comics. Beautiful coloring. Purples, magentas, yellows. Just seems really ahead of its time. And then these crazy spherical spaceships, which is quite different to some of the more angular, sharp-looking stuff we saw from Droulet. But like, Star Wars hasn't even come out yet, and he's lighting these planets and just doing crazy stuff. These magazines would have been a real influence on everybody making science fiction films at the time. Like, this all comes before Star Wars, and then obviously it comes before Blade Runner and Alien, and there is the whole connection of Jodorowsky getting the rights to Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune, in 1974 also, and then the team he assembles with Mobius and H.R. Giger and Dan O'Bannon, and this whole team of people. And I think Tangerine Dream and Mike Oldfield were meant to do the music score. I think Frank Herbert came over to wherever the film, and maybe being filmed in France or in production in France, and just taking a look at this like 14,000 page Bible or script that Jodorowsky was hoping to do. I think it was meant to, I think that the runtime was like 14 hours or something. And they'd already cut through, I think, 2 million of the budget of 9 million just in pre-production. So it was unfortunately always destined to fail. There's a great documentary about it. But without that gathering of creative minds, you may not have gotten a lot of other great projects that would come out of it, like Star Wars or Alien. Dan O'Bannon doing Alien with Ridley Scott, and then Blade Runner, and even in The Long Tomorrow, the story that Mobius did, You can see a lot of inspiration for Blade Runner in that film. So yeah, they're very important magazines for that regard. What will come after them in Hollywood and sci-fi as a genre. This is I think Droulet writing, and what's the name of the other guy again? Alexis. And you can see this great little kind of, it's almost like a school class photo of Arzak, a bunch of other aliens by Mobius, and a much more humorous looking version of Arzak taking a piss and being moved on by the cops. Cop cars by some sort of alien slime, and then makes a break for it, and there's just a guy taking the doozy over here. So always with the humor also. Don't take itself too seriously, this magazine. This is kind of like a sword and sorcery stuff going on here. Jules Leclerc again. And so here we go with the first appearance of Den in the magazine. Corbin's iconic story. It looks pretty good. It's first printed in Grimwit, which we also looked at in the Underground Corbin episode, if you want to check that out. Side by side with this Phantom of Paradise advertisement. Edited at time. But the colors are looking great. Did a bit of a comparison in that episode of the coloring, I think, in Grimwit, and then the new volumes of Den that just came out last year or this year. Yeah, these guys were just pretty blown away by Corbin. What he was achieving, color and just storytelling. So he was summoned for the magazine pretty early on. And I think he was pretty happy about it, just to be recognized in Europe. And also by these guys who are masters. High praise. Here's a kind of weird little, I guess, insight into Philippe Droulet's life. This is him as a young man, handsome fellow. Actually went to one of his exhibitions maybe 2 years ago in Paris. It's only a small exhibition in the gallery, but he had a lot of new paintings. So he's still making stuff. He'd be in his late 70s, I would say, maybe even early 80s. But this article seems to go through just his interests in music, film, art, whatever's inspiring him, movies. Your Tangerine Dream and Mike Oldfield, the fellows who are set to do the score for Jodorowsky's Dune. Some more Droulet. His more cartoony style, I would say. Well, maybe a more humorous style. Some of his crazy, nightmarish sci-fi stuff. Another installment of this Jules Leclerc. Don't know much about this strip, to be honest. Then enter Jacques Tardy. Maybe written by Droulet, that little story. No. Interesting to see Tardy doing sci-fi. Place forward, I suppose. And in just Just a very different color treatment also. Looks like some sort of dyes also. Yeah, it's a weird look for Tardy. Almost got a mix of his more like Adele Blanc Sec style, and then these almost like his riff on a Den or a weird Corbin-esque look. This fellow with the blue eyes. A couple more articles. And you have this pretty crazy. A lot of stipple and very rigorous detail cartooning. This is by, let's have a look. I think it's this fella here. Alain et Lesseur. Yeah. Not too knowledgeable on him either, but I can draw. Yeah, this is Alain. Pretty cool. More Jules Leclerc. And it's a kind of fairly iconic couple of drawings of this again, Gaulle, Jean-Claude Gaulle. This armies, things are getting tough in the army, and they resorted to eating cockroaches or beetles, spearing sort of fox or ferret creature, and pulling the legs off beetles. Very well drawn beetles. Amazing. Pretty amazing art. And so what was that, number 3? Soleil on this cover. And not too familiar with his work, but it's kind of a weird cover, this one. It's unusual, like this is when they're still trying things out with the title. I guess they're doing something different with every title before they settle. This is quite an iconic cover for number 4 of the spacesuit monkey Mobius drawing. It's funny. It's very late 70s sci-fi typeface. Kicking off with a bit of One Baudet, and then back to Alexis and Droulet. It's just an advertisement, actually. It's got a bit of a Prince Valiant feel, this story. Droulet, Prince Valiant. It's probably what it is. This is kind of this is the 3rd installment of Arzak, but it's kind of part 2 of Arzak. This little weird story where this dude is zipping across the desert. He's on a mission or a job to fix Arzak's flying creature. Gotta get past all these zombie ghoul creatures. Pick something up on the way in. Finally makes it inside this kind of communication center. Arzak's almost walking in circles, waiting for him to fix his beast, which is pretty interesting that it's almost like a simulation, ahead of its time in that thought process. I guess there was just so many ideas bouncing around between sci-fi paperback novels at the time, which these guys were, I'm sure, all reading. and getting inspiration for their comics. So you can see the tinkering around is paid off, and the Beast wakes up. He looks pretty pleased. Back on mounted his steed. Job well done. The guy rips off across the desert again. Kind of scratchy chicken story. That by Le Poulet Mas. Bon Baudet, another famous American underground comics artist. Kind of initially an unusual fit maybe for the magazine, but it's very idiosyncratic style also, but I suppose that's what they're looking for. Looks good. Boss. Nepsimo. Again, a very detailed line work in this story, and a little bit of a thru layout system going on with the panels. So yeah, I guess by issue 4 they're opening it up to quite a few different cartoonists. The ball has started to roll. And here's part 2 of Den. It's almost 2 years after, I think. No, sorry, it's 2 years after his C-Dopey strip. And another iconic set of panels of Den pursuing this very busty lady across Neverwhere, and this big reptilian fella on his tail, or on her tail. And then the reveal. Den's uncle leaving him these letters. Being sucked into the Neverwhere to embody Den. Great colors. This is a funny one. I remember looking at this for the first time and thinking it was pretty ridiculous. So you got this dude made out of dicks and this very busty, bald alien lady, and yeah, just floppy dick dude jizzing everywhere. And then he reveals, the guy gives, that he's actually wearing a suit underneath all these dicks. She's even more horrified by this. And this is by Witib. Advertisement for La Nuit. What's to come from Droulet. Miss Clerk. Text by Sharon. Kind of more humor, gag stuff in this issue. Quite a bit of it. So there are 4 issues in at this stage. Here's Rolf Corbin in its first French album printing of that story. And there's also Rolf. I have this one. Like a big black and white, a floppy album feel to it. Maybe it's a second printing of this, I'm not sure. 38 pages. Yeah. Philippe Droulet posters. Number 5. Another pretty iconic cover. Sorry. Another pretty iconic cover by Nicolet, who is also pretty amazing French painter illustrator. Does a lot of these crazy kind of bondage style sci-fi scenes. And he does a couple of covers. I'm not sure if he's in here in the pages of the magazine. Not its early days anyway. I went to one of his exhibitions in Paris also. It's good stuff. His wife is also a painter illustrator, does similar work. So here's Droulet. Really a lot of Droulet. He has a lot of work. A lot of different stories in his world. With a lot of depth. A lot to do with death, and I think the death of his wife and a whole other story. Double page Jules Leclerc action. I don't seem too bothered with Jules Leclerc or Dan. I think this is probably one of the nicest colorings of Dan inside these pages. It just looks really well. These just little highlights of liquid or magenta liquid on the side. It's just really vibrant in this printing. Really nice. Cowgirls at War by Michael O'Donoghue and Russ Heath. Also not really your typical for the magazine. It's not really sci-fi, it's kind of a western. But hey, you got the titties, you got the TNA and some Nazis. Why not? Armies, which I think is pretty much in every issue up to a point. Good few pages of armies in this one, if I remember, which is no complaint there. Again, I guess armies is not sci-fi, so not just sci-fi, this magazine. Even though that's what it's mostly known for. Crazy, this work. And I think this is the last installment of Arzak before Mobius begins the Airtight Garage. More iconic panels. A little snooper here. Amazing line work on these skulls, giant skulls. Really lets the imagination run wild as to what that skull belonged to. And then this iconic battle spread. Barzak flying over some crazy war. These are quite true layer, kind of HR geeker too. It is interesting to see what these guys are pulling from each other at the time. Really beautiful stuff though. Yeah, and the colors in here are really nice. Barzak. Here's more of this DNA or Relay and Alexis story. Les Adventures de Andre. They're kind of fairly famous Mobius drawing, I feel. I don't know if it's, I can't remember what it's in, but it definitely pops up a bit. That concludes issue 5. Another Mobius cover on issue 6. And it's going to have the first appearance of Enki Bilal, Mortardi, Corbin, and Mass. And it's the Major, the Major Fatal, star of the Airtight Garage. So Mobius is starting a new story. But before that begins, feast your eyes on this incredible line work by Enki Bilal. Pretty handy with a bit of cross hatching. Just a really stunning drawing. How much line? And then just this little focal point of the white space left for a sun or a star. Wild. And yeah, I suppose here's the beginning of Le Garage Hermétique, or the Airtight Garage. But it'll come back in a few, just almost like a little taste. Great vehicles from the start though, look at this stuff. And here's Tardy, Jacques Tardy doing another sci-fi story. Hairdryer spaceships. Really bizarre stuff. Pretty fun though. If Margeron. Too sure about this one. And yeah, the Major Fatal. So that's the beginning of this story. Kind of love this style. Always black and white and just not sparse line, but not crazy line either. No solid blacks, to speak, really. But you would think all that line work would get a little bit lost, but it actually all works. Obviously it's Mobius, but here's your blacks, but not on every page. This style, in this story also, this style jumps around a lot. There's some really experimental stuff like this. Almost a bit of Kirby coming in here. I'm sure these guys are obviously all grew up reading American comics. Just pulling a wide range of influences and making their own thing of it. Is all you can hope for, really. I wonder where Mobius got the look for all these pointy hat dudes. The motif of his that they wear these pointy hats. I'm sure it's some maybe religious thing from a different time. Always really, really good at just coming up with costumes and vehicles, as I mentioned before. So good that I think actually in that Long Tomorrow story there is a couple of droids that George Lucas lifted from the story and appear in Star Wars. I think it's the droid that appears in Hoth, the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back. It's a direct lift from a Mobius drawing, which is very telling of how much these comics had an influence on Hollywood at the time. My daddy got paid for any of that. That was a sneaky swipe. I'll be going through the other issues of this, so we'll get to that Long Tomorrow. It's a two-parter. I think it's maybe in 7 and 8 or 8 and 9 of Métal Hurlant. Here's more Den. Dropped off by that big bad out of hell. Pursued by more goons. I like this stuff too. I like these creatures. Like a Droulet world. Who is drawing? Bihanik. Oh, Bihanik and Droulet writing, and then Mass. I guess is this. Yeah, we came across him before in a previous issue. Doing that crazy kind of cross hatching and stipple style. It's pretty nice. Creature designs. Yeah, I like his stuff. Looks very time consuming. Cool panels though throughout. Little panels down the bottom. Crapax mini panels. And we got this last little strip by Robiel, or what's it called? Doesn't have a title. Almost Robert Crumb style. Let's have a look. Oh, it's Mass again. I think. Different style. Cool. So there you have it. First 6 issues of Métal Hurlant. I hope you enjoyed that, and yeah, we'll go through another 6 in a later episode, hopefully. So yeah, good night. Catch you in the next one.